order the meeting of the three-member panel of the building board for case number BCA 1-2001 involving Mr. Andre Spinell of Spinell Homes as the appellant and MOA being represented by Sharon Walsh as, I guess should be called a plaintiff, but I don't know.
Okay, the appeal's been filed by Mr. Spinelli.
Spinell.
So, Mr. Spinelli.
He is the appellant.
So he has filed an appeal for you to hear, and I don't understand where Mark is. Do you know what happened?
He's tied up with an ornery customer right now at the permit counter, and he says he's almost done with them.
We're going to have to change that procedure in the future because that's
Well,
got to be here.
he can come.
Well, he'll be presenting the municipality's case. And I got a call it a 911 call from the manager's office, so I didn't bring my file up here. But I believe the procedure is that there's a specific procedure in.
I tried to read it. I couldn't find if there was a
No, there is. It's you have your. Thank you.
Apology to all parties present. This is brand new. We're all feeling.
23 AMCR 23. That's 23, and it's the specific procedure for hearing appeals, and we'll follow that same procedure. That's what I don't have. It's right on my desk.
That was the new ordinance. That's not what
Right.
you wanted?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry.
This is the procedures under AMCR 23. You might have it in your packet.
Well, let's just follow the building board's procedure.
Well, there's a procedure. I mean, there's a who presents first. That's what I'm trying
You
to
do. He does. Muni presents first. The appellant gives their case.
Okay.
So, and I was going to do that. Obviously, as a building board thing, we probably should swear in all parties. Do you want to do that for the record, or do you not care? Is this
But
informal?
yeah, you do swear in, and we'll follow the same procedure. You swear in truth.
Instead of swearing in everybody singularly, why don't we just all, I'll ask you to raise your right hand, please.
Well, Mark's not here yet. We're not ready to get
Well,
started.
I'll swear him in when he comes.
Okay.
Do you want to wait? You want to postpone this whole thing for him?
Well, I'm just thinking it's just going to be like
Well,
a few minutes.
It starts at 12, everybody.
Let me go see if I can take him with.
You can present the case, can't you?
Actually, I haven't even read it.
Okay.
Do you have a copy?
I do.
Thanks.
An ornery customer, huh? Is that pretty common, or?
It's Mad Math.
Is that uncommon?
Well, yeah, this time of year, people are
Sorry.
anxious.
Straight.
Straight. As in George.
Yep.
What a day.
What, 3 days?
Yeah, it's been just phenomenal.
They said it was 61 degrees yesterday, I heard.
My truck,
It's like a nice summer day.
I read 60 in my truck, the highest I got up to.
You guys been starting any excavations?
Yeah, I got one digging right now.
How's the ground?
Fraud?
Frost level, I
No
heard
frost.
was not too deep, because all
No
the snow we got
frost.
early, it insulated the ground.
No frost.
Yeah.
Zero. That's you finding? I mean, I was shocked, not even an inch.
Certain, where do you build?
Hillside?
Yeah, so in the exposed areas with no vegetation, there might be a little one.
I mean, nothing. You could take a hand shovel and just start going.
Wow.
You know, we did test holes in Bear Valley only maybe a month ago, but we were under snow and there was no problem.
Wow.
ground sure is wet though.
We haven't been up to North Point, have we?
Yeah, I was considering this today.
Apologies, everyone.
What's it look like?
Clear snow.
Clear as snow?
Clear. Totally clear.
Frozen?
I was driving on the lots,
Good, mark yourself.
there might be some frost down there. Or I'm freezing pretty hard.
Now we're waiting for Sharon.
Yeah, Sharon Juror on the deck.
They came and get
Came,
you,
came to get me in.
and then they stayed.
Yeah.
I'm Chuck Spinelli anyway.
Please meet you.
Okay, all parties are present. I'll ask you to raise, those that are going to testify, please raise your right hand. You swear that what you say today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yeah.
Thank you. The three-member panel present today is myself, Mr. Michelson. I'll be chairing this little three panel. Mr. Feller is from the building board, and Mr. Straight is also from the building board.
Okay, if I can interrupt the procedures so we can cover it exactly. You introduce the case, explain the procedures to be followed. Appeal case number and name of the party appealing to be read into the record.
I did that
You did that.
already.
Okay, great. Testimony under oath, you just did. Staff outlines case under consideration.
I'm going to do that in about 2 seconds. I just wanted
And
to
then
tell.
presiding officer, so you guys elected you as presiding
Yes.
officer, okay? And appellant and witnesses give their presentation first. Conclusion of appellant, staff, and witnesses shall make their presentation. So, Mark provides an outline first,
Right.
then Andre makes it, that's his case, then staff responds. Appellant has the right of rebuttal after
Yes.
you respond. Any party can be represented by legal counsel, doesn't look like we're there. Formal rules of evidence applicable to action of law do not apply to hearings for the board. Only requirement is that evidence be relevant to matters before the board. And then the burden of proof rests with the appellant. Must convince the board by preponderance of evidence the appeal should be granted. And findings of the board should be specific findings of fact and conclusions of law. So you need to be keeping that in mind when you reach your decision as specific findings. And the affirmative vote of a majority, in this case 2 of the 3, that was covered in the ordinance, is necessary to grant the appeal in whole or in part.
Right.
And
We'll get a template prepared for the next.
Gotcha. Now with all that, I have mentioned we are here today for building board case number BC Alpha 1-2012. The appellant is Spinell Homes Incorporated, address 1900 West Northern Lights Boulevard, Anchorage, Alaska 99517. Representing Spinell Homes, I believe, looking out in the audience, is Mr. Andre Spinell and Mr. Chuck Spinell, or Charles, I don't know which way you prefer to go to.
Spinelli.
Spinelli.
It's important to have proper names.
You're right, but it's spelled here S-P-E-N-L-L, so I don't see an E on the end of it.
There's an I at the end.
I don't see the I at the end of it either, sir.
On the end of Spinell Homes, or the name of his name? The name of the company, the name of us is different.
Okay, Spinelli.
It's like Michelson and daughter.
Yeah, representing the MOA in this case will be Mark Pinello, and Ross Nostlinger. And we shall start. And Mr. Pinello, could you please give the board a brief outline of the case, and don't go too much into detail right now. Be appreciated.
Pinello.
No, he said it right.
Sir.
Oh, I thought you said Pinell, and then I was really mixed up.
Sharon, stop now. Relax.
That's the company name, Spinell.
Trying to have everything proper here, it's our first time.
Okay. So the case involves the use of partial height blocking for light frame wood construction. The appellant, Mr. Andre Spinelli, had proposed to allow for the details that are currently contained in the 2009 IRC for use, for general use, it is assumed, for residential construction. Staff has reviewed the information at hand and is recommending to the board to decline the appeal based on the evidence provided.
Thank you, Mr. Spinell. Mr. Spinelli.
So, my appeal is pretty simple. There's a lot of research out there. I haven't really gone that far into it or brought it forward as part of the appeal. Basically, what we've seen is when the municipality introduced the handout where they stopped using the 2-inch air gap underneath the bird blocking, it was, for whatever reason it reduced the amount of ventilation in roofs. In the 2009 IRC that detailed with the 2-inch gap under the blocking made it back into the 2009 IRC. And it even states that it applies to our wind zone and seismic design zone. In the 2012 IRC or IBC, they actually added that section into the prescriptive methods of the 2012 IBC. Now there's some discrepancy on how that applies. My appeal would basically say that given the history of the blocks, when there might be 100,000 houses built in Anchorage, maybe 10,000 built in the last 2 years under the policy, the current handout that's currently in place. The other 90,000 were probably built with at least a 2-inch air gap or no blocks whatsoever. I don't see any buildings in Anchorage failing structurally. I don't see wind blowing them over. I don't know of any reported incidents where what the Muni has called out as cross-grain bending or basically the top chord of the truss rafter breaking at that 2-inch block. There's no known failures. And what we do know is that ventilation of roofs is an issue, and deterioration of buildings seems to be more likely case for the way our buildings will end their lives. It's pretty simple. The code seems to allow it in certain areas and sometimes not. My common sense thing is we did it on all the houses. It's not failing. We should keep doing it or start doing it. Resume.
Mr. Feller and Mr. Straight, do you understand we was talking about the 3/4 high block versus the full height block? Should I have them draw a little picture up there on the whiteboard so we can stare at it?
In the appeal, there's some pretty good pictures.
Okay.
No, I understand exactly what you're talking about.
Okay. And for I want to just revert back a little bit. I should have done this before and let you speak, Mr. Spinell. Conflict of interest. I want it known on the record that I know both Andre Spinelli and Chuck Spinelli know them quite well. I do not feel my association with them at this point will sway me either way in this decision today. It's a small town. Everybody knows everybody. Any of you folks have any conflict of interest for the record? I don't have one.
I should also, for the record, state that I have done work in the past for Mr. Spinelli and Spinell Homes. I'm currently under no contract to do any work or currently looking at any work with them. So that is out there, but I do not feel it will affect my judgment in this case.
No conflict.
Okay, I just wanted to get that out. Mr. Spinelli, is that all you have today for your testimony?
I'd just like to add one thing. Andre attempts to satisfy the requirements that the MOA has, whether we think they're reasonable or not. The problem we have with this particular portion of the code is we had an inordinate amount of callbacks with ice damming this year this is by far the worst year we've ever had. You know, most snow, coldest winter, and as the building community and housing market has dictated more complicated roofs. There's a lot more gables on the front of them. You know, we used to build a 40-foot building with just a straight roof come down, and there was plenty of opportunity for ventilation. These days, you'll see, you know, condominiums that are 24 feet wide, and 10 feet or 12 feet of them will be gabled, and it'll be really hard to get ventilation in them. And you know, just in the at the roof lines between the at the firewalls, you know, they're asking us to stop the blocking close to there, and it's presenting tons of problems, and you know, and it's a far worse case scenario with the water damage inside the house from this ice damming than it is of anything else. You know, I mean, it's one of the worst problems we have dealing with the houses that we've built. And, you know, we've built, myself, 3,000 houses as Spinell Homes over the last 25 years. And in my experience, you know, I'm not an engineer, and I don't understand everything these guys talk about, but I understand that the reason they want the blocks, they don't want the blocks there, is they think that there's going to be a roof failure. In the 3,000 houses that I've built, and the 2,000 houses that I built prior for Bowen Construction, there's one instance that we've had a roof failure, and it was up at Chugach, right at the top of the hill, and it was, you know, a roof was parallel cord trusses, and they just blew off. It had 4-foot overhangs, and it just blew off. It had no hold downs at all on the side of the roof and all that stuff. It was the first week I was here, actually, the roof blew off, and we put it back together, and that's the only failure in, you know, like 5,000 houses that we've personally been involved with anything like that. We're not trying to save money. We're trying to have our customers not have water dripping on the inside of their house, and that's what happens when you don't have adequate ventilation in your roofs. And this is the the way to get it.
Do you have?
I got that downstairs.
Let me share this. Any questions from Mr. Spinell? Mrs. Straight.
Mr. Spinell, either of you, Mr. Spinelli's. What, in your experience, there's the prescriptive or the conventional method of design versus an engineered design in the Anchorage area? Well, this applies to the Anchorage area. In the Anchorage area, is there a percentage? Is there any that you actually get through under conventional design rules? Is there?
Well,
to get everything
the
engineered?
design process for Anchorage is a little bit of a mesh. There's basically, if you follow the prescriptive rules in most cases, and until you get to mainly shear walls, and at that point you go to a design. But we follow most of the prescriptive methods and until we design a shear walls.
I know, but during this process, during the presentation, get right to asking questions. Okay, and then-
So it's kind of a hybrid, I would say.
Can you ever get through any shear walls or diaphragms without
We'll
having
just
to
have
get
to
them
call
engineered?
back.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've done prescriptive houses.
Okay.
It's kind of a toss-up one way or the other. I mean, you have to be in the west side of Anchorage to have the proper wind speed. It ends up being easier to go with kind of what I would say is kind of a hybrid design method that's evolved in municipality. It's kind of the standard operating procedure then.
When you've done these fully prescriptive houses, have you followed these details that are required by the MUNI? This is handout RD13, the handout in Weston.
Yep.
Okay. That's all I have.
The MUNI policies and handouts kind of supersede just about anything. That's kind of
many questions for Mr. Spinelli, but I'm going to hold off. Ms. Walsh just pointed out, I think it's a little flaw in the writing, but maybe not, that we'll let the MOA now defend, I guess, or present their case in depth, and then we're just going to have to call back Mr. Spinelli or Mr. Paulette.
The procedures in the regulation are appellant presentation, staff presentation, then question.
Is there any way through the chair, is there any way we can append that? Because
We've never done that on the building board
It's an
panel.
informality to be waived, but it should be waived formally if you're going to do that.
by the time we get to the end of all the discussions, any questions that are in our
I
minds may be
understand.
forgotten.
It is a glitch that we're going to take care of.
We'll
I
take
think
that
with a vote, I think we can amend that out for this proceeding. And
May I make a motion to formally waive that and ask questions immediately following such, as we have them, following both,
has that motion been seconded?
Second.
All in favor?
aye.
And
Okay.
I'd just like to make a note, we should make a note of this to ask at the work session we're going to have
Yes.
with the municipal attorney about holding these.
Absolutely.
proceedings. We should ask
That's the way
about
we've
that.
done it in the past at the building board. We've always had the appellant up at the stand, up at the mic, and ask them questions of that, and then call them back if there's
And
further
other
questions.
boards do that too. We wanted to.
So with that, thank you, Mr. Straight, for that. Any other questions for Mr. Spinelli?
Yeah, I have some questions. So this is kind of a further clarification on Sterling's question. So this is purely a shear wall issue when it comes down to the engineering questions. It's purely a shear wall issue, so it's wind and seismic forces. And so you said you have this mesh of different designs. It really gets right to the heart of the problem. So what percentage of your shear wall designs are engineered versus following the
100.
Okay. Is that, and the other thing I heard you say, which I was surprised, is that so even if you did have a 100% prescriptive design, you are not allowed to use the details in the IRC, these details? You have to follow the handout?
It's a gray area, but typically if the MOA has a handout or a policy, then the plan reviewers, the inspectors, the whole culture is going to follow that. They're not going to waive from that. Technically, you could fight it and possibly get past it. That's kind of why I feel the handout, is a big blanket that's stricter than the code.
Through the presiding officer, as a point of clarification, these details came into the code of 2009. The IRC in 2009 just adopted last July. The handout precedes that, so they haven't been coordinated.
The handouts from 19.
I don't know when you built your last prescriptive house, if it was after the 2009 had been adopted or not.
Well, I mean, he said 100% of the lateral design is engineered, so.
It's just, it doesn't have to be that way. We have a system. It's faster than going back and finding the prescriptive rules.
Okay.
They're just kind of fussy.
Okay.
I mean, the bottom line is, when the load gets to the top of the wall, you're dealing with 40 foot of wall. The load's the load. It's spread out across the entire top of the wall, and the blocks are then above that. So whether you have two little tiny shear panels right here and here that are transmitted through that whole line, or you have 40 foot of shear panel, the load's the load on that wall, and it's continuous through that top plate.
Right.
For the
Okay.
sake of discussion, can we make a clarification?
Yeah,
What do you
well,
wanna make
through the
clarification?
presiding officer,
The handouts are not code. Handouts just show you options to meet code. A person does not have to follow a handout.
Yeah.
Policies are code. That
Through
is-
the presiding officer, are these handouts not in the MOA code?
No.
Through-
Well,
The
actually,
handouts are part
well,
of
this one, is this one in there?
Only 3 of the details in the handout are given in 2385.
Are they these three details that are on this handout?
Correct.
So this is in the code.
Yes, these 3 details.
by local amendment.
through local amendment adoption.
The current version of RD13 has a 4th option, which is not in code. But it is similar to option 3.
and that is not the option that is asked today with regards to partial height blocking per IRC figure R 602.10.6.2.
That is correct.
Okay.
Mr.
Second question. So, you mentioned that you've got a lot of problems with ice damming and water leakage on the inside of residences that's due to ventilation problems. How much do you feel is attributed to lack of ventilation at the eave as opposed to the total ventilation, which would include the eave and, gable vents or ridge vents? Because ridge vents get covered by snow and
Yeah, the thing, you need two vents. You gotta have something up high and you gotta have something down low to get the air to circulate. And you can add vents, you can pop as many holes in that upper portion of that roof as you want, but you're never gonna be able to add ventilation under the eave line without, what you can do is you go back and you sawzall out at the 2 inches, and you make what we're doing happen after the fact. It's been done several times. It's something, if somebody has an air ventilation problem and they want more air, you can say, well, this doesn't meet the MOK code, but this is how all your neighbors' houses, or 90% of the houses in town, or probably more, this is what you can do. So you have to have air flowing in from below. The thing that's so ideal about having a 2-inch gap is there's not, with all the insulation, whatever truss type, there's only that much space in each bay. You have 6-inch top cords coming down. So to have the air flowing in that channel is the important part. You could have a whole mess of air moving around right here, and if it's not flowing from that eave in that channel, it's just, you're not going to have the cold air in that area.
right. Okay, let me phrase the question a little bit differently. If 100% of the houses were built using the 2-inch gap, what do you feel? How do you feel that would affect the ventilation problems that you're having? Because to me, it doesn't solve them all. When you've got a valley, you've got a gable with a valley, and you've only got a small portion of the wall of ventilation, you're still going to have areas of the roof without adequate ventilation. When you've got ridge vents that are plugged up.
That's true.
So-
Every house is different. You could build the same house at the bottom of the street and the same house at the top of the street, and the roofs are going to perform differently, just the way it is. Every house is going to be different. All this is better ventilation. It's that simple. It's more.
Okay. But so do you feel would it really solve the problem totally, or would it just be one step to improve?
It's a large step towards improvement. From the builders with more history, when we switched, that's when we saw a large increase in issues.
I'm going to help you out here in a minute.
Okay.
I think with your questions.
All right,
Being
okay.
a builder on this board, and Mr. Spinelli, I'm going to ask you questions so I'm not taking over the podium. The eave ventilation issue has changed and evolved many times over the past 12 years. It went from pre-98 code to a 2-inch, 2/3 high blocking. And then we switched from, the industry switched then, is it not correct in your opinion, from a 9 1/4 inch yield to the 11 1/4 inch yield?
Correct.
To enhance the insulation value at the eave, and then we went to the 11 1/4 inch yield with a 9 1/2 inch block. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then, from what my understanding is, then they went to a full height blocking with 3 holes in it. And when they did that, that's when the ice damming started to become prevalent in the area.
Yeah, the ice damming increased, ventilation was decreased.
And it was determined, I think, at one time that the 3-inch block gave approximately 8.5 square inches of ventilation per space. and the 2-inch by 21-inch gives 42 square inches of ventilation per cavity.
Yeah, it's a drastic increase in ventilation.
And being a builder in town, I know when we went from the 3 holes blocking, which personally I was against from the beginning, I had probably 25 calls a year. And when we went back to the new method now of the 2/3 blocking, I've eliminated the calls. But that's just me, and I think that's through. So then, when Mr. Spill, in your opinion, when they went to the full height blocking, we started having more ice. Is that not when the municipality or the code increased the requirement of the ice shield on the roof at the eave because there was an obvious problem?
I can't recall that. Maybe Ross might be able to help with that.
Okay. And I think I've heard, being in the industry, that there was some paperwork or something where they did whole house testing outside someplace or in Australia where it was shown you don't need any blocks.
There's been several tests all over the map that have.
So you
they've
didn't bring
done
any of that?
I have a NAHB report that where they tested several different options. No blocks, the blocks with a 2-inch gap, and I've seen several others.
Was that supplied with this package?
No, it was
Through the
not.
presiding officer, I believe staff's presentation will cover. some
Okay,
of these.
excellent. So, Mr. Spillane, I have no further questions. You have any further questions?
Actually, one
Go ahead.
quick question. You mentioned all of your design you do now is per this handout. Which of these options do you use?
We use the option with the perforated block.
So option 1, which is every truss space is blocked with 3 2-inch holes?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. I guess, sorry, as a follow-up to that, is there a reason why you prefer that over the other options?
Actually, we do alternate, the option 2, where you alternate full height block. The option 3, which would work the best, is just a bit more work for the framers, and it basically kind of less appealing to the eye to have the block out in the overhang.
I got a follow-up question.
It basically doubles the amount of blocking for the roof. I mean, rather than one block, you do 2.
On option number 3, I believe you could take that block and put it to the inside too.
Yeah, that's option 4. Yeah.
That's not on here then.
It's not on
On the
Are you looking
handout
at-
that,
it's not on this hand.
The one from the Muni?
on the handout,
Yeah, it's
not
this
the
one.
one.
That's
Yeah,
an
this-
older version of the handout.
This block can actually go inside though.
Yeah, but still doubles the amount of block, and it doesn't fall on the plywood seam. So therefore,
Okay, I have no further questions right now.
Keep thinking of things. Another follow-up question. Blocked diaphragms versus unblocked diaphragms. Do you do any blocked diaphragms, or do you keep all yours unblocked?
we do some block diaphragms when we need to
You have a percentage
transfer
feel?
load. When we block a diaphragm, it's mainly a portion of a diaphragm where we're trying to drag loads, and I would say it's 20% of houses, and in those houses, it's 10% of the diaphragm that ends up blocked.
Thank you. No further questions.
Mr. Phil.
No further questions?
Right now, we now ask the MOA to elaborate on their testimony.
So with Andre's start with regards to the applicability of the IRC, there has been some confusion as to whether the IRC applies to only portions of town or all of it. In looking at the current language in the 2009, 2012, and even back in the 2006, the language hasn't changed, but the interpretation has been, I think, misapplied. The provisions in Chapter 3 allow for conventional construction to occur in wind speeds of 110 or greater, but there are specific standards that have to be met. Either the Wood Frame Construction Manual from AF&PA, ICC has a high wind design standard out now, ICC 600. That particular design standard allows you to do conventional construction up to 150 miles an hour for wind speeds, and all seismic design categories, save for Category F. That being said, the provisions in the IRC, if everything is met, there is no reason why those prescriptive details in Chapter 6 can't be used. They haven't been amended out. The handouts and the current amendments amend Chapter 8, but not Chapter 6. So there's no reason why MOA could deny the use when meeting all of the requirements in chapters of the IRC and any subsequent standards that follow, say, Upper Hillside, for instance. One thing to pay attention to with regards to the applicability of the details is that it is specifically for braced wall systems, and that's the title of that section is that the braced wall connections in seismic design categories D0, D1, D2. Braced wall panels are defined in the IRC as those meeting the requirements for the braced wall systems in Chapter 6. When you start getting into engineered systems, you all of a sudden no longer have a braced wall panel that complies. The position of the municipality is that the IRC does give allowances for combining conventional and engineered systems in Chapter 3 under engineered design in 301.1.3. But there's a specific standard that you have to meet, in that the engineered systems and the conventional systems have to be compatible. What has not been provided right now is that level of compatibility. With all of the designs being engineered, with the diaphragms being engineered, what's being asked is that a conventional detail be used to tie the two together. And that's where we're finding fault with the argument. So, that being said, going through just the general requirements on the modification, what's being presented really isn't a specific or individual case that meeting the requirements, either the other details in RD13 or in AMC 2385.
And if I can interject clarification, we're on page
3.
page 3. And it has to do with your new procedures, the new ordinance, and the standards for this group to review the modification.
So, as stated, there aren't any specific individual or special individual reasons why you couldn't apply any of the other details that are available to satisfy the need for ventilation. There are currently 4 options available in terms of details that could be applied regardless of conventional or engineered designs. Plus there's the details in the IRC when you meet all the conventional requirements. Even said, as far as the modification standards are concerned, there are five requirements that need to be met, and staff's opinion is that one does not apply, the other 4 do not have not been met. With the modification, keeping with the intent and purpose of the building code, the requirement for ventilation has been met. The Spinell Homes wants to provide for adequate ventilation to keep the issue with regards to ice dams at bay. But the other requirement is from a structural standpoint, whether or not there's adequate connection between the roof assembly and the supporting wall assembly below. We feel has not been met. Item 2 is with regards to health, fire and life safety issues, and structural requirements. As stated in item 1, the architectural, fire and life safety items has been met. There's no change in the health, if not a benefit, because of the fact that you're no longer dealing with the ice damming issues. But there is still the structural aspect which hasn't been met. Item 3 is with regards to strict application, whether or not there is any limitations or whether or not there's undue hardship in applying the strict letter of the code. There hasn't been any evidence stating that by not being able to meet the code that they can increase the ventilation. There's other builders out there that have not had provided any evidence. Let me rephrase that. Haven't been any other builders that have made mention of ventilation issues. Where they said that this application of RD13 is the direct cause.
You must not be talking to builders.
I've talked with
No,
builders.
you just hold off.
I've talked with builders, and they said that. I have talked with builders, and they said, yeah, we do have ice damming issues, but none of them have specifically said that it is directly related to RD13 or to the provisions in 23A. Not to say that there aren't any issues. Like you said, every house is different. Item 4 is with regards to existing conditions, then the modification standard doesn't apply because we aren't trying to change a current violation. And item 5 is staff feels it's just a summary of standards 1, 2, and 3 combined into a single standard, and refer back to those standards for discussion. The overall approach from staff standpoint is that the approach has merit. The idea of using a partial height block has merit. Andre had mentioned testing. I have reviewed 2 of the larger tests done by NAHB, one in 2002, one again in 2011, both of which, from my understanding, are tests that were to validate the position of the details in the IRC and to provide additional guidance and credence to a partial height system, either a partial height block or just framing anchors provided to the truss to wall connections. The one thing about the testing that I noticed is that the testing doesn't necessarily match what we currently do in Anchorage. All of those tests were based on high density woods, southern yellow pine, which is one of the most dense lumbers used in construction that I'm aware of. The heel heights were very, very shallow, primarily 2x4 cords, top and bottom. The load testing wasn't necessarily a representative, in my opinion, but of a cyclical loading condition. It was a strap attachment to a monotonic loading device that pulled in one direction, and they measured the maximum deflection, maximum strength at the point of failures. Several discussions with regards to the general question have been brought up in numerous design communities. AFMPA has looked at it, APA, American Plywood Association, has looked at it, the IRC ad hoc committee has looked at it, and the general consensus is that there still needs to be more information provided with regards to applying it in an engineering sense versus a conventional sense. That being said, staff feels that at the current current moment, until such time as that additional information is provided, that the board deny the appeal and leave the current status quo as is. But keep in mind that building safety is open to new information in accordance with Chapter 3 and other provisions in the building code.
Thank you, Mr. Pinella. Questions for Mr. Pinella?
For the testing that you looked at, what type of diaphragm shear levels did they test to?
The diaphragm shear levels weren't necessarily tested. What they were looking at was connection capacity in the two cases that I recall looking at. They kind of back calculated some of the diaphragm shears, and most of the diaphragm shears were, if I recall, less than about 150 pounds per foot.
When they failed?
When they failed. And that would be the design shear load that they would expect. Ultimate capacities, they were looking at in the neighborhood of most cases 600 or 700 pounds per foot that they've had in one test, where they calculated probably at about 1,000.
And was the failure cross-grain bending in the cords? Or what was the failure mechanism?
Most of the testing was either truss plate failure, where the truss plates would rotate and pull away from the ganglion plates. There were a couple of cases where there was a combination of cross-grain bending in the top cord, but it was more a precursor to a truss plate failure. Oftentimes the issue was either the toenail connection from the plate to the top plates would fail just because of installation issues, or the clips. Often the test primarily used Simpson H2.5As, and those failed in either bending or in shear.
I have a question, Mr. Pinella. I've read the test. With the test, if you have truss plate failure, let's use Anchorage. In Anchorage, if you have 11¼ inch heel, and you used a 2x10 block, which is a 2/3 high block, that block covers the top of the truss plate.
Correct.
So there would be very limited chance of truss plate failure. And also in Anchorage, we're required to use H2's minimum for truss to wall connection.
Correct.
And we're also required that the 2x10 block would have to be nailed to the top plate with a minimum of 3 nails plus into the truss.
Correct.
So with all that we're required to do in Anchorage, are we talking about, because I've always been under the understanding that the reason that you're not allowed to use the half high or 2/3 blocking is because of cross shear breakage of every member of every truss. Is there any testing done, in your opinion, that it was obvious that you had a multiple series of cross shear breakage?
The testing that I'm aware of does not show that cross-grain bending was prevalent in cases where there wasn't a block. There were cases where if you got a fairly stiff connection at the base, then you would have potential for not all the trusses, but some of the trusses failing. The nailing connections would fail in cross-grain.
And being not an engineer, as my two cohorts here are, just a lowly builder, does the fascia board nailed on the outside, the fascia board that most builders use in Anchorage, does that help on the exterior of the eave to prevent some cross-shear breakage tied in with the plywood?
I would have to say no, given the mechanics behind the bending issues within the diaphragm, since the fascia board is outboard and the resisting line is inboard per se from the diaphragm, that the load would have to go all the way out to the fascia board and then back in through the truss cord in order for it to be of any valid load path. If there was sheathing or some sort of structural panel on the bottom of the truss tails, then yes, it would actually act as a
Like a
diaphragm.
box beam then?
Yeah, it would act as a diaphragm boundary and would eliminate some, if not the majority of the issues. As a clarification on that one, there is a specific detail in Chapter 6 of the IRC that talks about that particular configuration, where they use a soffit framing to eliminate the cross-grain bending issue.
You made a statement, and again, as a builder, I have to, I mean, I'm a builder, I'm sorry for that, sitting on the panel here. But you state that there's no other builders in town that have come to you with problems. Ross and I have gone round and round, Mr. Nusslinger and I have gone round and round as to who actually was responsible for the introduction of this new method. And that's irrelevant at this point in time, but the reason it was brought up because I was a mouthpiece for the Anchorage Home Builders Association, and we had a number of builders, and I want to say 30 to 40 of them, that were crying the blues that they had ventilation and icing issues. I don't know why Mr. Spinelli didn't bring all 40 of them in here, but it would have got overcrowded. But it is in the municipality of Anchorage opinion, is the blocking more important than mold, mildew, water intrusion, and rot? That is happening every day.
I would say that that would be an apples to oranges comparison. One is an architectural life safety issue, one is a structural issue.
But the life safety issue is real.
Life safety is,
I mean, the mold and the water intrusion is real. I can,
yeah, the damage concern is
Health
real.
issue.
Huh?
I would call that a health issue.
I call it the health issue, but
Yeah.
it's real. I can
There-
take, I can
yes.
take us all in the car right
And-
now, probably take you to
and-
10 places.
And as I mentioned, with regards to the third standard, or sorry, the second standard, is that by increasing the allowable ventilation, it is a significant increase in the benefits for health because of the fact that it is helping alleviate the ice damming issue.
And Mr. Bill, I'm not trying to be argumentative with you, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to,
Yeah.
May I add to that, since I was referenced and all that?
well, yeah, you can, because I did bring your name up.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, yeah, I mean, you know, back in the mid-2000s or whatever, we got together with the building industry and we came up with these solutions 3 and 4 that allow for basically you to not have full height blocking all the way around the perimeter of the structure. Options 3 and 4 produce the same net result that Andre is requesting. You know, you'll have 1.5 to 2 inches of continuous ventilation around the perimeter of your house, just like the detail in the IRC if you choose to use these options. So,
And I was getting to that. We Mr. Nostlinger, like, when you were involved with us, helping us out or doing it, back in 2007, the industry was opposed to that then, but it was kind of like we knew, the industry knew that there was a need to increase ventilation, and at that point in time, it was, we'll take anything we get to help our clients out and to help the houses breathe breathe better. And the industry has always been against either one of these because it costs about an extra, and cost is not supposed to come up in these meetings, but it does cost a substantial amount of money to put these blocks in. There's some clients that have actually had us go back and cut them out because they didn't like the looks of them, and that's always after the fact. But it was proven and agreed to at that time with the industry and with yourself and with Mr. Thompson and everybody that ventilation was a very, very, very important part. And the only reason Mr. Wild, who designed this, I believe is where it came from, and he was stressing that the he kept going back to cross-shear breakage. And that's why I was trying to ask Mr. Pinello if the cross-shear breakage wasn't occurring in the test, then maybe the cross-shear bending, and my engineer friends can help me there, maybe it's not as critical. But the ventilation, I will tell you as a builder for 38 years in this town, is very, very, very important. And every house that I built personally, and addition I've done, where you required me to put the little 3-hole blocks in there, I have nothing but problems with them. Every house prior to is good, and every house after is good. And there's about an 8-year period where those houses just, in plain English, suck. Actually, they don't suck. They don't draw properly, but they're just horribly built houses. And I hate to go to my clients and say, I'm sorry your house was built during this period, but too bad. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Go ahead.
You know, I agree with you. I never came up with the 3-hole
No,
idea.
Ron-
And the
Ron.
3-hole idea never met code because it never provided the amount of area that the code required.
Right.
So when the municipality came up with that, they immediately created a conflict with their own code.
Correct.
And I guess my only point was, since then, we came up a way that you could meet both the structural and ventilation aspects of the code with these options 3 and 4. And, yeah.
And we're working together. You had a question, Mr. Strait.
Yeah, sorry to kind of take us in a different direction, but I have some more questions for Mr.
Go ahead.
Pinello.
Yeah, that's excellent.
First of all, what exactly is the purpose of the municipality handouts in the building safety website?
The purpose of the handouts is to provide the general public a means of directions in terms of how do you actually build something that complies with the requirements of the building code. Most of the people that we interface with are not engineers and not builders. They're the general homeowners, and say, okay, so how do I solve this particular problem? We have the details there to give some general guidance. And it's not that the handouts, as Ross said, the handouts are not code. They are there for guidance.
Except for these 3, correct?
Those 3 particular details are included in the amendments to chapter 8.
These are code now, right?
You know,
Because
we'd
they've
have
been
to
adopted, right?
we'd have to see how it exactly reads, but
They're in the
Those
They-
website as amendments to the.
to the IRC.
Right.
Mhm.
So they would be code then.
I don't know, it could read that these are acceptable ways of meeting the code in
So-
our local amendment, not saying you shall do this, this, or this, you know?
So you're forming these expressly for people who are not engineers and expecting them, how would you then expect them to know that there's another option, the one that's expressly allowed by the code, if that is not on this handout? Is there,
As far as staff policy is concerned, that is part of the discussion. Is that here's what's typically, we refer to the handout as what's typically done. As far as other options, we try to inform those people that there are other options in meeting the requirements of the code with regards to both structural and non-structural requirements.
And again, to reiterate, the handout hasn't been updated since the last adoption, July of 11, that included the IRC, that included the new prescriptive details.
in your opinion, if the detail from the code, detail 602.10.6.2, the one we're discussing, if that was added to this with a note saying this is allowed for prescriptive or for conventional construction, would you have a problem with that?
No. If that particular note is that it is permitted for conventional construction, absolutely not. It's
Okay. Taking us in a different direction, cross-grain bending has been discussed quite a bit.
Mhm.
Is that expressly forbidden by the code?
Yes, it is. Well, I should say that the National Design Specification for wood designs notes that cross-grain bending or what's called tension parallel or perpendicular to grain is to be minimized or avoided at all costs. If you have a condition where you cannot avoid it, that you have to take steps to minimize the effects. That can include means of reinforcing the wood section to provide other means of transferring the forces and the shears within that wood member against the tension perpendicular grain.
So it would be fair to say the code does not expressly prohibit it, but strongly recommends against it.
Correct.
Okay. Another question, same question I asked Andrea. In your experience, block diaphragms versus unblocked diaphragms for residential construction, do you have a feel for, do you agree with his statement that's in?
I would say, I think you mentioned about 20%. I would say maybe 20 to 25% is about right in terms of what we typically see. In terms of the overall, I would say closer to about 20% of in terms of the percentage of the roof area. When you have a blocked diaphragm condition, is that about 20% of the roof is blocked.
Okay, thank you.
I've got another question, kind of building on one of the options Mr. Spade talked about. So if we added the IRC detail with the 1.5 to 2 inch gap, and said that that was allowable under the conventional construction provisions or under an engineered solution where the diaphragm shear was less than a certain threshold value, is that an approach that would be acceptable to the building department?
As
And I know you can't speak for the whole department, but I'm just trying to get a feel.
If there was a limit set to it and there was backup technical justification for that limit, then yes.
If I could ask a clarification on the question, you mean adding through local amendment? How do you mean adding? You
Well,
can't really do that here today.
Right, no, I'm not, I'm looking a little further than
Okay.
that, to see to where we could kind of address the problem, without just,
And Mr. Feller, I think if you added the IRC diagram, I think all the others would be a moot point. Because there's not a builder in town would use anything but.
well, no, see, what Mr. Straight was saying, that if you added that detail, you'd still have to meet the conventional construction provisions, which probably a very small percentage of the houses that are built in Anchorage would meet. Because there's very strict limits on the amount of shear wall you can have and the height to width ratio of the panels and
But this is above the shear walls, I think is what I've heard. That the blocking puts you outside the shear wall envelope, and it's above, so it doesn't affect the shear wall. You're an engineer, so it's really not affecting the shear wall.
No, the issue is you would have to meet the IRC conventional construction provisions in order to use that detail. And the point I'm making is that very few houses are going to meet that, so you wouldn't really be able to use it very often.
It's not just the shear wall, it's also the length and height of the shear walls, it's also the spacing.
Right.
And it's the spacing concern that probably dictates a lot of what is going on with regards to any approach on capacity. Maximum allowable spacing in the IRC, I think, is now 35 feet between shear walls. Typically it's 25, and that can constrain a typical design approach where sometimes you have shear walls that exceed that particular spacing. And so there's a combination of things that would have to be addressed with regards to setting an engineered limit to the detail. I should note that option 4 of the current handout does have an engineered limit at 95 pounds per lineal foot. And such a limit on not necessarily 95 pounds per foot, but a limit in such a fashion on a partial light block detail, I think would be acceptable to plan review staff.
Mr. Chair, if I may suggest that we're already into kind of a discussion stage. Shall we give the appellant a chance to rebut?
I want to just ask people a good idea, and I will. Can I ask one more question? Mr. Patel, you mentioned that the testing done back east was done with southern yellow pine. And in your opinion, southern yellow pine is one of the strongest, highest tensile strength woods.
No, I said that it was the densest.
Densest, okay. Which gives strength.
In certain cases, yes.
Okay, and you are aware that I think all the trusses in Anchorage they use Doug Fir Select Grade #1.
Correct.
Which I believe is equally or better than southern yellow pine in
It's-
all categories.
When you're looking at connection designs, it's a question of density. Southern yellow pine has a density, I think, a specific gravity of 0.55. Most lumber products used in town, Doug fir, hemp fir, spruce pine fir, are 0.5 or less. And so that additional amount of density actually does add a significant,
Okay.
does provide for a significant increase in connection capacity.
Thank you. Rebuttal, Mr. Spinelli. It's your time to shine.
Well, I just kind of jotted down a few things. I'll just kind of go over them. My view, the load is the load regardless of the engineering type, prescriptive, engineered shear wall versus brace panel. The load on the building is the same, and therefore it's the same as the truss to wall connection. I don't see any difference in, the way I write down on a piece of paper that this house meets code doesn't make a difference on what the load is at that connection. And the other thing I just want to keep emphasizing, there's no known failures with the 2-inch gap in the top chord of the trusses. That's, our big reason why not is, we got to have structural integrity. There's hundreds of thousands of houses were built that way. There's no known failures. Additional moisture in the roof framing, it's not just an architectural issue. Wouldn't you say that additional moisture in the wood over long periods of time is going to compromise the integrity of the roof assembly?
Maybe structural issue.
I mean, that's kind of like you don't have this without that. And then, allowing the 2-inch air gap detail with a threshold, a pound per linear foot threshold. I mean, that's really was what you kind of struck on. I mean, that was really kind of been my goal. Is the handout just says you can't do it. These are the way you do it. And seeing it show up in the code and reading all these reports, and the type of houses I build, I don't typically build massive, complicated, highly loaded houses. I just can't believe that doing this would ever cause me a structural problem. The last thing I want to do is cause myself a bunch of structural problems. Our warranty extends so far, but we have a name and a reputation that we like to uphold. We go beyond our warranty on almost every time something serious pops up. We don't want to cause ourselves problems. So,
I just want to add one little thing. Andre is our engineer, our in-house engineer, and he understands what is going on. I have been in the building industry since I quit teaching elementary school in 1978. And, I had the chance to work on an ICBO report with a scholar from Washington State University, and I forgot his name now. But at any rate, he did our work for us, and the bottom line, what we try to get to is to the best possible solution. And we build houses. We build hundreds of them. We built 25% of what was built in Anchorage last year. There was 200 houses. We closed 80 of them. so that's over that amount. So we have no interest in doing anything that circumvents the code or creates liability for us. What we are struggling here to do is eliminate the liability of not having adequate ventilation in the roof. Every year, every house has a ventilation problem or a potential ventilation problem with this condition as it exists today. The condition that you're worried about is going to happen in a 0.8 or 9 magnitude earthquake, which may happen someday or may not. That is something out there in the distance, or 120 mile an hour wind, I guess. But that happens, every 20 or 50 years. This happens every single day, winter to every single house. And somehow you have to weigh that, those two options. And I'm a pragmatist. I'm here dealing with the problem, and this is a way bigger problem than talking about the shear load or the transferring the diaphragm from the roof to the wall. So, to me, this is a no-brainer. Government is here to protect us, and government isn't here to protect government. And it sure sounds to me like the government is just trying to protect the code, and the code is just a piece of paper that if you read the intent of it, is to protect the public safety. And what we're here talking about is creating better policy and saying these guys don't know what they're talking about. We know better what is going to create a safer house, and this is going to do it. We don't come here very often, and we feel strongly that we're here today to solve this problem. And we have more experience doing this than anybody out there. We've built more houses than any other builder in the state of Alaska over the last 25 years, and we have more problems than any other builder in the state of Alaska because of that. And whenever we have, I put in, I don't know what the Lacoste made us put in 2 layers of drywall in roofs for like 10 years or 15 years.
That's off the subject. Joe.
But we did it.
Get back.
We did it because the inspector told us to do it year after year after year. And finally, somebody's idea came up that that isn't really what the code says. It's what somebody wanted to do. We changed, but we didn't fight about it. We're not about trying to save money about this. We're trying to create a better product, and this is a nightmare for us to not have ventilation in these roofs. And so that's why we're here.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question for the chair, really, and based on a comment from staff, that if we're not here to, staff mentioned that we're not here to look at changing this, then what are we here for if this is what is being
Mr.
appealed?
Straight, I've asked that question
If I
to
could
this
clarify.
board.
Let's review.
Let's just say we have difference of opinions.
You're
here,
about
so.
to start kind of your deliberation phase, so let's review the procedure right quick, and then I have a comment I'd like to make before we get to that phase. But the burden of proof rests with the appellant, who must convince the board by preponderance of evidence that the appeal should be granted. So, and the findings of the board should be specific findings of fact and conclusions of law. So that's your 2 things to consider as you enter your discussion. What I would say in terms of on administration, the effect of granting the appeal, as we see it, is that it would make these details available for use by all builders in Anchorage without doing the compatibility.
Not only builders, everybody in Anchorage.
Everyone, all people building homes in Anchorage or building a structure in Anchorage like this, without the need to show the engineered compatibility between engineered and braced and non-braced parts of the structure. And that not all of those people may take the same care and concern that Spinell Homes does when they do their work. So they may not design in the same redundancies and whatnot that Spinell may be doing. So you need to consider that granting the appeal opens that door all the way across the board. We have learned
since you opened up the gates, administratively, you obviously couldn't get to, otherwise the Spinell gentleman wouldn't be here. Otherwise, if you had gotten to administratively, they wouldn't be here, is that correct? Well, anyway, and then wouldn't the inspectors your inspectors in the field note that the 2/3 block were put in correct? I mean, you say some people wouldn't know how to do it, only Spinell knows how to do it. I kind of take offense to that a little bit, but
No, I said not all would use the same character that Spinell said. What I'm saying is that the compatibility evaluation that staff feels is required in using these details, the inspectors have no way to ask for that. I mean, that happens at plan review stage. But by allowing use of detail, there's no requirement for that.
your inspectors are pretty smart. I'm going to give them that. I know, you have some very smart inspectors, and they catch a lot of stuff. And if something's not right, they'll catch it.
And at that point, you have a crew standing around that's costing a lot of money.
At that point, it's the builder's problem.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the appeal is granted, the inspector's opinion and the plan reviewer's opinion is irrelevant. The full height blocking won't be required for anything anymore.
Correct.
I've got a question that kind of goes right along with that. The way the appeal is written, it's an appeal of MOA handout RD.13. So if we approve the appeal, the handout goes away, and you guys are actually in a worse position than you are right now. Because at least right now, this handout gives you some options for the ventilation that you want. If the handout goes away, you either design to IRC, conventional construction provisions, which you're not going to be able to with the majority of your houses, or you're just strictly designing to IBC, and then you're even more limited on how to get your ventilation. So I think the way that you've written the appeal, granting the appeal gets rid of the handout the way I read it, which doesn't do you guys any good.
Mr. Chair, is it
Yes.
possible that we can make a recommendation to amend the handout?
I think we're testing the waters, Mr. Straight, and I think anything we do is probably going to be possibly questioned or tested later on. So I would think with this first one, I think yes, we can amend something and deliberate and give our opinion to see where it goes.
So back to my original question, what are we doing here? If we deliberate, make an opinion, and say, okay, in our engineering opinion, this handout is wrong and we need this handout, does that affect anything as far as the building department? Can they just ignore our opinion?
No, I think what they can do then, as we all heard at the last board meeting, then MOA then has the right to go to the full board.
Correct, but if they do not do that, if it just ends there, do we have the ability to dictate to them to change this? Even if it is approved by the full
In
board?
the past, I've been on the building board over 17 years. In the past, we've done that. We've instructed the building official to do something, and they've done it. I don't know if the current building official is going to do that, but the old ones have.
Well,
I mean, that's what's happened in the past. The building board has made recommendations to the building official, and the building official said yes and went and did it.
well,
But I don't know.
Okay, let me go one more time into the procedures. The affirmative vote of majority fully constituted board is necessary to grant an appeal in whole or in part. So I read that as giving you the option to partially grant the appeal.
Because we've done that on the building board too. We've taken like 3
You're right.
segments and given 2 out
This
and not
is-
1.
This is difficult because of the way it's presented. What you can do is, and it sounds like, between the discussions we've had today, it's been pretty valuable in terms of involving where would be the right place to go next, is to recommend, you could deny the appeal. If you accept the appeal, you're right, the way it's written right now goes away. Is that? Yeah. If you can deny the appeal with a recommendation, I think, to staff to modify the handout, X, Y, Z, and you can ask staff, I believe, to come back to you with a report. Yes?
Yeah, but if I may,
you
Sharon,
know, progress of that in a certain time.
if I may, I don't know where Mr. Fella read it, but I'm reading under E. This is an appeal of MOA handout RD 13. I can't speak for Mr. Spinell, but I think what he's saying is this is an appeal to not have to do necessary RD 13, but do it the other way. I think that's the way I read
But
it.
he hasn't said that. He said it's an appeal of the handout, okay, but what are you proposing to do in substitution for that?
If I could finish what I was saying before.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You can recommend, you can deny the appeal, recognize the problem, and then make a recommendation to staff to, two recommendations. One would be to amend the handout to coordinate with the IRC 2009, which needs to be done,
Well, actually,
and then perhaps introduce the threshold level at which, you know, the threshold loading that you brought up, that sounds to me like a direction to go. That would, you know, so coordinate the handout with IRC 2009 and arrive with the help of, you know, the design and construction committee at a threshold level that would be.
now your threshold level, I want it to be high enough, Mr. Feller, that it just doesn't incorporate the Spinell homes. I mean, only because, no matter how this goes today, I know what I'm going to do in my houses when I build them, and I'll fight tooth and nail for them because I want ventilation.
Right.
So I know what I'm going to do, whether it meets any thresholds or not. But I just want you to be cognizant that Mr. Spinell he builds a fine home for what he's doing, but it's not all the houses in Anchorage. And you have to give, so I don't know what I was going to ask you, what the threshold should be, 105, 130,
Well, like I said,
160, 180?
You wouldn't decide that today. You would say that you would direct staff to amend the handout again, coordinate with the IRC 2009 and recommend develop with the input of the design and construction community the threshold level at which the IRC could be used.
Not just the MOA staff, because I could.
I said the
not-
design and construction
Okay,
community.
it's not saying that Mr. Pennell would do it, but he could go back and say, well, we're not going above 80.
Well, all handouts go for a 30-day review.
Right.
We're talking about what we're.
Okay, we got
trying to
your
get
instructions.
today.
I do have to catch a plane here pretty quick.
Okay, so that's.
I'm
the
going to close
recommendation.
the public hearing.
Actually, there is no public hearing.
Well, you said it was public. That's what you
No,
told me
it's
for
a
the last
public
3
meeting, but
weeks.
It's a public meeting, but there's
I'm
no
going to
public
close
hearing.
the
No public testimony
hearing.
taken.
No public testimony. There's nobody sitting in the audience.
Just the
that I
appellant
can see.
and
Well, Jerry's here. He's been very quiet.
he's
And
staff, but.
I'm looking to my engineer, my fellow board members. How would you like to proceed?
Well, I mean, from what I'm understanding, it's a real problem, and maybe I think we should do something to try and address it. And to me, what makes the most sense would be to allow the IRC detail with the 2-inch gap up to a certain level of force, and what makes the most sense is to relate that back to the diaphragm shear minimum nailing. So if you all these houses are engineered, so someone's looking at the diaphragm shear and determining the diaphragm shear nailing. And if you can show that you meet the minimum diaphragm shear nailing, which would be, 10 pennies at 6 inches on center on the perimeter, and the level of diaphragm shear that's associated with that, then you can use that detail. I mean, something like that. In other words, if you can show that your diaphragm works with the minimum code nailing, then you can use this detail.
In lieu of doing a compatibility evaluation.
But let me ask you a question, Mr. Feller.
That's going through the main steps of the compatibility evaluation, because you determine what the diaphragm shear is, and it's below a certain threshold level, so we can use this detail.
Let me ask you a question with that being said. That, most of the houses I built are tighter than 6-inch nailing. So
For the
For the
diaphragm or the walls?
Are you talking about the roof nail?
Talking about, when I say diaphragm, that's roof.
Oh, no, okay, I don't ever succeed that very much, I mean. every once in a
Almost
while.
all houses, roof nailing is done prescriptively unless
Right.
it's a unique.
Unique, and that'd be a diaphragm roof. You're probably correct, I see where you're going, I thought you were talking about walls, and, yeah, the roof would be no problem.
But that's, I don't know that we're gonna really solve that right now.
Well, I
but
can-
I think that's, if we're gonna come up with something that actually works, I think that's the direction it needs to go.
So would also, would adding, and I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, would adding the IRC diagram, I think it was 1062 or whatever it was, to RD13 as another means, would that be along the same concept? And then with, adding it to RD13 with the provisions you're stating? Because then they could do any one of RD13. If you had somebody,
That's what I was getting
If
at.
you had
was
somebody
that
come in,
coordinated with
right.
the IRC 2009.
right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can do that now, it's just not, it may not be as obvious because it's not part of the
No,
handout.
but you'd be adding it
We
to
could add it to the
RD13.
handout. But I,
And let people, because some people may really want a solid block. If that's what you want to do, then live with it.
but the way the code, the way it's set up now, you're not gonna be able to use that very often because in order to use it, you have to meet the prescriptive requirements of IRC, and most houses do not meet that.
Yeah, but it's
And it's already an option.
like I said, our roof nailing is all done prescriptively. I mean, 99 houses out of 100, roof nailing is specified per prescriptive methods of the code. So it's kind of like where I was saying, it's a hybrid system. It's the accepted, engineering practices within the municipality. Certain parts you engineer, your shear walls you engineer. The rest is all out of the code, or just the prescriptive section of the code.
But once you engineer the shear walls, you're
That-
out of the IRC.
Yeah, but that's not the way it works here. That's not the way the typical accepted engineering practice in the municipality.
I know, but the point I'm making is
Yeah,
that in
I
order to
get
get
it.
accepted by the municipality, you're gonna have to meet all the prescriptive requirements. So as soon as you go to an engineered shear wall, you don't, and they cannot accept that detail, and they probably wouldn't accept that detail, the way it is right now.
So
Are you saying, I thought that if you have a 4-foot, if your house is all prescriptive all the way around, and you have the front garage wall that doesn't meet the prescriptive method, you can design that shear wall in the front part of the house and leave the rest of the house prescriptive, and you only design that part.
yeah.
And what I think and I'm trying to understand because I'm not an
Yeah.
engineer. I think what you're saying is once you engineer one thing, the whole thing's got to be
Well,
engineered.
no, that's,
Yeah,
You-
because that's what I was trying to get at,
Okay.
is that it's a hybrid.
If I may, that would apply to if you engineer just those wall panels, then all the eaves above those wall panels and that wall line would then have to be done separately per an engineered system. The rest of the house you could still do per the IRC.
Well, we closed discussion over here, so seriously, because this could go on for another 4 hours. All I'm saying, guys, is being a builder for 38 years, this is a major problem. And there's more damage caused by water intrusion, mold intrusion, and carpenter ants from the moisture than there is from any. In 38 years, I've repaired probably 125 to 150 roofs. I've never seen one crack in the top cord of a truss.
no, I agree, there is a problem, so what are we gonna do about it here today? I mean, if we propose that the IRC detail be allowed and used in any condition, well, the municipality.
But we have no roof failures, though. That's the problem.
But that's not gonna fly, so.
If I may, I took the liberty this week to do a little bit of research on this, and I have a few things to go through, and then I have a proposal I'd like to put out there.
Excellent.
First of all, I called up the APA, talked to Mr. Ed Keith there, you probably discussed with him before about this specific item. And a few things he mentioned. First of all, prescriptive roof nailing works out to around 180 PLF. Also of note, the APA has never seen a failure of cross-grain bending when you have a 2-inch air gap. It has not in their experience, they've never seen it, so it goes beyond just our Anchorage area. Really, the reason it went from allowing the air gap to no air gap was because us engineer academics got together and said cross-grain bending is bad. So we eliminated it, and now we're starting to realize that even though it doesn't work well, it doesn't work well from our calculation standpoint. It works just fine in reality. So that's more or less the way the APA sees it. A lot of it has to do with block diaphragm versus a non-block diaphragm. From an analysis standpoint, a block timber diaphragm, you treat it kind of as an I-joist. You have cords at the end. You have a web in the middle. Web handles shear. Cords handle tension, compression. That's not the case with how they analyze an unblocked diaphragm. You don't need a boundary element along the edge because by default, by definition, it's unblocked. So you don't need blocking there to nail into. You don't need that to be able to transfer that load down as long as you have a system to transfer it down. Putting in blocking at 2/3 height or with a 2-inch air gap, all the load from the diaphragm is then transferred by the nails at the edge through cross-grain bending over that 2-inch. You can calculate that and figure out that works out to about 50 psi. There's no published values for tension perpendicular to the grain for timber out there, but again, from the APA, they said that is very small. They've never seen an issue, and they have no problem recommending that be allowed. I'm also looked through some of the testing that you talked about and some other testing, and based on all the testing, as well as an article in the Structure magazine, which I'd be happy to forward you, they found out that in no place in fact, most of the testing, as you mentioned, doesn't even deal with blocking. They just treat the trusses as a portal frame with either toenails tying it down or 2 straps tying it down. In that case, all of those failed either with the things pulling out, or the only closest thing to cross-grain bending was, as you mentioned, the truss plate kind of folding over to the side. The cross-grain bending, especially with blocking in there, because it's such a small moment arm, there's so little moment, it does not develop to be an issue in any of the tests shown. Also, from all the tests shown, the load at which any of these methods failed, the block method or the portal frame method, looking at it in terms of a PLF, all of that was higher than any of the design values for unblocked timber diaphragms. So anytime you have an unblocked timber diaphragm, as long as you meet the requirements for that, you can get away with, based on the testing reality, you don't need blocking. Now, by the IRC and prescriptively from the IBC, we do need blocking, especially in prescriptive method, specifically to prevent the trusses from falling over, not specifically for the transfer of lateral loads. Basically, all this comes down to the fact that I feel that it would be, from an engineering standpoint, acceptable to allow the detail of the IRC to be used in any unblocked diaphragm, due to the fact that the loads in the unblocked diaphragm never cross the threshold at which the partially blocked system is going to fail. It's going to be able to transfer that load through cross-grain bending into the blocking through bearing, and then from the blocking down in the top plate through either the toenails or A35s or various other methods. So that would be my proposal, is that, I don't know if we make a motion for this.
Make a motion.
I would make a motion that we append community handouts
RD13.
RD13 with an option 5. This option 5 would be identical to the IRC figure R602.1.10.6.2 with a 1 in parentheses, with the note that it's allowed in any time you have an unblocked diaphragm. So we talked a little bit about the percentage. Most things are unblocked. Where you do have a blocked diaphragm, you're needing an engineered system as well. So you're going to need to engineer that connection. And at that point, an engineer can either go into the details to figure out if the cross-grain bending is there. The onus on the engineer is to show that there's the identifiable continuable load path from the load to the foundation. And we have that everywhere except for that cross-grain bending. We have that cross-grain bending amount shown through testing, empirically proven that it works. If that is enough, not enough for the Muni, and really I wouldn't be comfortable with it in a highly loaded diaphragm, so I'd want to check that myself. But for any unblocked diaphragm, empirically it's shown to work. So that kind of
So that's your motion. No, you did
kind of went
excellent.
off on the motion.
Mr. Feller, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on that? I don't have any. I think your layout was fine. I think you did a lot of research. I thank you for that.
Point of order, and as ex officio member of the board, I don't vote, but I still get to participate in discussions. You need to check on submission of new evidence. That needs to be, you brought in some new items that need to be entered into the record.
I would be
So
glad to share them. with
Sharon, you're
everyone.
carrying this
we have
way
some
too far.
APA, it's just to hold up the decision. So, we need to have you do that, just to submit your evidence.
Okay, I can email it to
I mean,
everyone immediately
just
following this meeting.
copies of who just
I can
or whatever.
give it all to you now if someone wants to make a copy.
Okay.
But see, that will be in his findings of fact, and since you're going to point it out, asking him to do that, he went above and beyond
No, I
and
think
did
it's
his
great.
work.
I think it's great. I'm just
He's
saying,
not-
we need to get a copy of it into the record. That's all.
You could do that, but I'm saying he's did an excellent job, and I think he spent more time on this probably than either fella or I did. And I commend you for that, and I like your approach. I enjoy your motion. The only negative to this is you're going to have to come up with the findings of fact, and I think you've done it just by, and I think the findings of fact, I think, could be your reports that you labeled. I think they'd be fine.
You have a-
I'm ready to take a vote in favor of
One
his.
second.
Well, let's continue with the
No,
discussion. What are the, I know you gotta go, make this brief. What are the highest diaphragm shear levels in a wood diaphragm you can get in unblocked?
Will you
It's been a
need
while-
Sharon?
It's been a while since
I'm just saying, it's another note for our work session with the municipal attorney, is make sure we understand.
Because if you keep hand locking us, then there's no sense in meeting. You know?
Get up to
We have to
You
have
just
it.
understand,
structural one.
I appreciate the new information as much as anyone does, we just have to
320.
make sure that it's properly introduced.
We've always done that in the past. I mean, this new rule
That
is
is
It
not
has-
what might
In
back
terms of
off
other
and just
boards,
stick with sheeting grade.
there is
that-
a procedural question.
I've been looking at the sheeting grade, not the
Yeah, I mean,
structural grade.
I'd be comfortable with anything, anything in that range would be.
And he shouldn't have to supply that ahead of time.
But
I think would be fine. I mean,
And you can have it. I'm not saying you can't have it. I think it's great.
If you're comfortable with it, they're gonna come back on appeal.
Right.
we need to be sure that this, that in terms of especially establishing the roles of board members, in terms of offering new engineering, is that proper or is it proper?
Well,
I think it's great.
Well, the thing
But
is,
is it proper to hear, you're supposed to hear this, hear that, discuss, make,
but he is discussing,
make
which he did.
make a decision based on the evidence presented. Typically, that's evidence presented by the staff or the appellant. It's not new evidence brought in by a board member.
He
I
made-
think the information is
Yeah, but
wonderful.
he made his decision based on the appellant's question. What he did is his own research into whether the appellant was accurate or not. And then he went further and he did the research and found out, and now he made a motion and he gave all the reasons for his motion based on his information. No, Mark, I'm gonna stop
Sure.
you.
The question procedurally, and I'm just talking about boards and commissions and how they, what the standards are.
But
for
you're gonna
operating.
tie our hands, Sharon, for the
I'm-
record. Do not do this every
I'm not a
meeting.
voting member. Well, it's important that we establish this thing because this is a new way to go.
All right.
So,
Miss-
we need to check on that. We'll make a note for the board,
Mhm.
the board's work session with the municipal attorney, so the board understands as they have these 3-member panels. The point that I'm bringing up is, if you recall, in the procedures, the board has so many days to ask for new information, and typically that kind of information should be presented to all 3 of you in advance of the hearing, so you can all digest it. And it's unusual to have this kind of information introduced in this way. And I'm just saying that, let's make a note. I'm not a voting member. You can vote however
I digested
however you wish.
everything he
But
said.
we need to be cognizant of procedures for future hearings, so we all understand how to bring new information in a way that there's no concerns.
If I may, some of the tests and reports I mentioned were also referenced by both Mr. Spinelli and
Right.
Mr.
Right.
Pennell, as well as having one of the reports in his hand.
Right, I understand. So I think it's commendable.
Mr. Fella,
that
do you
did
have
the
any
research.
more discussion?
No.
favor?
I have one other item of
Go ahead.
discussion. The only place the unblocked diaphragm capacity, there is one case where it exceeds the capacity of the testing empirical data, and that's with 3-inch nominal joist members. I don't think that's actively done.
Very
So
rarely.
That
Very
may be a
rarely.
footnote to add on there, but that can be worked out later. But my recommendation.
I'm sure you're
is-
gonna be getting a phone call from staff to help them out in this, if you don't mind volunteering to help them.
I do not. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, that's, I think you'll be getting a phone call. With that being said, all in favor?
Aye.
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 It has been the motion, the appeal before us today, board case number Bravo Charlie Alpha 1-2012, submitted by Spinell Homes, in the opinion of the, what do we call ourselves?
The three-member
The
structural.
three-member structural building board panel has been approved. The motion was made that, and Mr. Straight indicated that he would help Ms. Walsh and her staff with the guidelines on how to appropriately place it on handout RD 13D, isn't it RD 13? It wasn't a D behind it, was it? No, RD 13. With that being said,
Okay, so was there a specific, so the motion is to review.
he wants, the motion was
to add on
that
option 5, including our 6021,
per
from the
R
IRC, which-
602.1,
per-
parentheses 1.
amend the handout, with the note to allow that use of that detail with any unblocked diaphragm.
Correct. That's the way I understood it.
So the appeal was of the handout, the response of the board is to recommend an amendment to the handout. Recommend or required.
All they can do is recommend.
We can't require.
Not going to him.
As I understand, this handout's already been adopted with the local amendment, so even if we amended it, it wouldn't take effect until it's re-adopted.
By the building official.
Yeah.
As well as the municipality, or the
Or-
assembly, because it is in the code.
Or the building official can make a policy.
I know it's difficult, but I understand we have to administer it after.
Well, I think you get
So-
the intent, Sharon, so why don't you just
Yeah, now you
make
have to
it
make sure
happen?
understood it, so at this,
Make that
I
detail
mean, seriously,
available.
just make it happen. I mean,
So-
you can do that.
so,
So,
the staff will leave this hearing with,
a mission,
what?
a mission.
The staff will leave this hearing with the goal of amending this handout in that
That's
way.
correct. And make
And
it a
then-
policy for now until it's adopted in
But
2012.
then we will reissue it as a policy under the 30-day notice, although it'll be one of those ones with the, it's to the benefit of a contractor so they can use it when it, as soon as it's issued.
Immediately.
And then key it. Okay.
I think that, yeah, it's just, yeah.
So our problem here today was that we asked for too big a caveat. If we would have come in with one little issue about one house, you wouldn't be worried about all this stuff, right?
Not necessarily.
We would just have evaluated that on its own particular instance.
I mean, if it was like we were arguing about I don't know, the way
A
one
4x12
shear panel
versus a-
was done on one house, it would have been a lot simpler solution than this solution, right?
Well, it would have been a lot easier if the appeal would have been much more clear, because the appeal
More
statement
specific.
is,
It's general,
Oh,
and
yeah.
okay. That I just wanted to
Yeah.
The
You know.
appeal was done really quickly at a meeting so that we could start this, so we could do,
I think
so
it-
you guys could learn how to do your part,
And
new
it's very
process.
valuable. And like I
Thanks
said
for the session.
Well,
thanks for help.
I said at the meeting, you know, I'm
Meeting's
glad
closed.
you're
You guys
right.
can talk all you want. Thank you, guys. And Mr. Stray, I appreciate all you did there.
Sharon, you're late for my meeting.
thank you,
Can we-
everybody involved.
Can we do this on Monday? Can we do it on Monday?
Yeah.
I'm
Thank
late
you.
for another
And
meeting.
Mr. Phil, a lot of good input. There was a lot of good
Thank you.
discussion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank
So-
you. Thank
I mean, I just wanna make
Thank you.
something, that's, I just
We're
wanna
off the
make
record
everyone,
now.
off the record, but I wanna make everyone aware.